So picking up where we left off, we know that these are congruent by the matching arcs. So I can pretty much just copy and paste one number from the other triangle. But there's something else that's kind of cool here is if you actually trace these triangles, they have something else in common. There's actually one more marking that I can add here, and that's on WT. If you noticed it when I traced, WT is the same on both sides, and that's reflexive property. Is WT congruent to WT? Yes. So you could actually add a tick right here in this picture if you wanted to because of reflexive property. And that will help us later whenever we're trying to show that the triangles are congruent. But back to solving. I'm trying to find out what y is, and I now know that a triangle right here adds up to 180, and I know this angle is 2y plus 2, that's 120, and that's 20 because of all the copying and pasting. So all you're going to do is just add them up and set it equal to 180. So if I combine like terms, I'd have 2y plus 2 and 120 and 20 would make that 142 equals 180. And then from there, you're just going to solve. So if I subtract and then divide, I would end up with 2y equals 36, 38, and then divide both sides by 2, and y would equal 19. That's it. But if you didn't know that those parts were congruent, well, then you only would have had two things. It would have been kind of difficult to add. So taking a look at this next one, they don't have any markings on the picture, so it's a little bit difficult to tell what goes with what. But if you go back and read, then maybe you'll catch it. It says given triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. They told you what matched. So if you want to color coordinate it. So A would go with D because those are first. B would go with E. And then C would go with F. And you don't have to color coordinate it, but it does help a little bit to know that if angle E is 42 degrees, well, I also know that angle B is 42 degrees. So it wants us to find X and it wants us to find Y. Well, if they're congruent, you have a few options. Remember that congruent means part equals part. So I know that this is 42, I know that's 42, I know this is 3y, I know that's 3y, and I know that if this is 5x plus 2, well, that would go with 87. So there's a part equals part right there. So 5x plus 2 equals 87. That would make 5x equal 85, and that would make x 17. So I just did part equals part. But if I go to find 3y, I have a bit of a problem because I don't know what this angle is right here. But I do know that this is 42, which makes that 42. And if you can't do part equals part, they're probably going to add up to 180. So there we go. We have three angles inside of a triangle. We know that three angles will always add up to 180. So 3y plus 87 and 42 would be 129 equals 180. So 3y would equal 51, and that would make y 17. It was just a fluke that they both happened to be the same number. So once you know one, you know them all essentially for this. So we knew that A was 87. We knew that B was 42. And we know that y is 17, so we can plug that back in, or we can add and subtract from 180. So that would be 51 degrees. And then we can just copy and paste it over here because the triangles were congruent. So everything would match up. So whenever you're solving, ask yourself, can you do part equals part? And if not, you're probably going to use 180. So if I take a look at this next one, it says given that XPS is congruent to the triangle DNF. And I'm going to go ahead and color code. So X would go with D. P would go with N. and S would go with F. And it really helps to color code on this one because if you caught it, look at how much they've turned it around. They've really turned this triangle around. Now, for this particular problem, 180 isn't going to help me at all, and that's because now I'm talking about the sides. So now I really have to do part equals part, and I need to match the parts together. So if I have this x piece right here, 17x plus 3, goes with xs. Well, I color coded, so I know that's purple, green, but I can also look up here and know that xs goes with df. So that's going to pair with 54. And then if I take a look at 4y minus 3, 4y minus 3 is between xp, so that would go with dn, 57. And then once you have those parts, you can set it up and solve. So 17x plus 3 would equal 54, and 4y minus 3 would equal 57. And then you would just solve each one from there. And you could solve that on your own if you want to, but you should be good at solving. So let's take a look at a problem that doesn't have a picture. It says triangle bat is congruent to triangle dog. Angle B is 14, angle G is 29, angle O is 10x plus 7. When in doubt, draw it out. It's hard to know. Are these going to be part equals part? Well, which parts go together? Is this going to add up to 180? Draw a picture and find out. So I'm going to say triangle bat is congruent to triangle dog. And your picture doesn't have to be perfect. They don't even have to be congruent. As long as you have this statement, right? Your picture is okay. So B is 14 degrees. And I did it in order. So I know that B goes with D. So I can also say that D is 14 degrees. Okay, they told me that G is 29, so I know that G is 29. So if G is 29, then I know T is 29. And then O is 10x plus 7, which means that X is 10x plus 7. So this wouldn't necessarily be part equals part. This would be that they add up to 180. Now, you could do part equals part if you wanted, because we know that a triangle adds up to 180. I could add 14 and 29, and then subtract that from 180, and that's going to tell me what the angle is. But sometimes that doesn't quite work out if we have multiple variables. So I'm going to add all these up and set it equal to 180. So I'm going to have 10x. Remember that 7 and 14 is 21 plus 29. So 21 plus 29 would be 50. So 10x plus 50 equals 180. And then from there, you're going to subtract the 50. I'm going to give you a minute to solve it. And hopefully you got the x was 13. Now, if it had said find angle O or find angle A, then I would need to take it and plug it back in, but it doesn't. So taking a look at our last one, it says the triangle cow is congruent to triangle pig, and then it tells me CO is 25, CW is 18, IG is 23, and PG is 7x minus 17. When in doubt, draw it out. So you could sketch out the two triangles again. One is cow. And then if you did this, you already made a really big mistake. I started with C in that left corner, so that's where I need to start with P. And then I know that C to O is 25, C to W is 18, and then I know that IG is 23, which means that OW has to be 23. It already told me that they were congruent. And then it says that PG is 7x minus 17. Now, remember in this problem that I'm dealing with sides. So I'm not going to use 180 in here at all. But what I do know is that 7x minus 17 would pair with 18. So part equals part. So 7x minus 17 equals 18. That gives you 7x equals 35. So x would equal 5. And that's it. It said find x and we found it. So make sure that you're being really careful and that you're doing part equals part when possible, and you're only adding up to 180 if we're talking about angles in a triangle. That's it for congruent figures and congruent triangles. I'll see you next time.